Welcome everyone. Hello, hello. Oh, thank you. Good turnout today. Thank you for coming on First Friday for one of our Discovering History speaker talks. Next month we will get back to our normal schedule, and I do believe the rest of the year they will all be on a First Friday. I do want to make a couple announcements per usual before we get to our speaker today. If we haven't met, I'm Chrissy. I'm the Director of Museum Operations here. Monday, if you remember, Monday, July 27th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m., we will be having our annual membership meeting. So anyone that is a member is welcome to come, see what we did the previous year and what we will be up to next year. And Erin will be going over that with everyone. And there will be light refreshments. Our next Discovering History speaker is August 7th. Normal time, noon to 1. This one seems very interesting. I don't know if you've looked ahead at the schedule. It is Frugal Frontier Living, Scarcity, Waste, and the First Recycling Revolution with Ryan Holter. So that will be an immersive program that uses Marietta's 1788 frontier history to demonstrate how early settlers lived with minimal waste, contrasted with modern landfill systems and long-term material impacts. I do believe he brings things to look at, and I don't know what that entails. But it is it says immersive, so hopefully there's no actual landfill experience. Ryan Holter, the presenter for that one, is a Marietta resident, teacher, and volunteer, presenting with a shared passion in local history and a lifelong devotion to environmental education. Last thing to talk about is One Vote starts this evening. They had their dress rehearsal last night. I heard it went very well. And tonight we'll begin the 2 weeks of shows. So tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday, and then next weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as well. There are still tickets available, and you can purchase that on the One Vote the Musical website. We can help you as well if you need to do that at the front desk or over the phone if you haven't gotten your tickets. I know this weekend is very limited, so if you wanted to come this weekend, I would rush out of here after you're finished to do so. So let us get to our talk today. Professor John Hancock will discuss his book, Traveler's Guide to Ancient Ohio, which takes visitors to the many indigenous earthwork wonders of southern Ohio, including the brilliant landscape monuments recently added to the UNESCO World Heritage list. Professor Hancock will recount the 30-year story of how this project came about, the vision for a curated regional approach to Ohio's brilliant American Indian earthworks, and describe how this book showcases southern Ohio's rich and surprising layers of cultural heritage for both armchair and on-site travelers. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor John Hancock.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you to the museum. And am I on here? Must make sure I'm on. Okay, good. I need these. Yes, so this talk is about the amazing ancient heritage that we have here in Ohio, and it's a thrill to be here in one of the great earthwork cities, as I'm sure most of you know. And the story is about a three plus decades of collaboration with just about everybody that knows things about these sites all over Ohio, all the archaeologists and a lot of Native Americans and a lot of other people as well. And I'll explain how all that happened. But sort of the theme here is how I got involved in this. Because, again, being in one of the great earthwork cities, you've probably listened to talks about the earthworks before from archaeologists. And one of my archaeologist friends once said to me, well, what could an architect possibly have to say about earthworks? And so he was teasing. But I've spent 30 years answering that question. And so I will explain that all to you, and I'll explain why a certain perverse point of view that architects have, architectural educators like myself have, leads to these kinds of writings about the earthworks, which is different from what archaeologists do. Doesn't contradict them, but of course, you don't do that. They've got the facts, right? And the important theories too. So there's other points of view. So that's the theme that'll develop throughout the talk. And also, I want to point out that there's two books that came out at the same time. And the stories of them are intertwined with each other. So I'm going to talk about both books in this talk. This is the compact travel guide, which the shop is selling upstairs, and which we'll be signing afterwards, if you're interested in having your copy signed. And then this is the other book that came out just a few days apart from it, back in April. And this book was published by the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. And this is a different genre. This is like a coffee table book, a big glossy a book about really only the 8 earthworks that were inscribed on the World Heritage List. So it results from the World Heritage process, whereas the other book covers the entire state, the entire southern half of Ohio, and the whole thing. So 2 different genres. And this one also, I will be selling this myself at the signing table for $35, cash or Venmo, in case you are interested in doing some early Christmas shopping for earthwork enthusiasts that you may know. Okay, so the main topic, of course, is the astonishing monuments of a great and brilliant civilization which flourished here in southern Ohio, across southern Ohio at the time of the Roman Empire. And you have beautiful earthworks right here in Chillicothe, that right here in Marietta. Sorry, Chillicothe was yesterday. That's another great earthwork city, as I'm sure most of you know as well. Sorry about that. But you have beautiful earthworks here in Marietta, and but I find that in different regions around the state, the local populations have sort of different vantage points on the topic as a whole, right? So I thought here I would maybe fill in a little bit of a little bit more of the background about the topic, just in case, right? It's not always true that people in different parts of Ohio kind of know the whole story. So I certainly didn't know the story. Okay, I was hired at the University of Cincinnati in the late 1970s to teach architectural history and architectural design. And my job was to develop the history course, which in those days meant European architectural history. So I was all over this stuff, you know, the villas and the landscapes and the monuments of the great civilizations that everybody already knows about, right? Like medieval France and the Greeks and so forth and so on. And I had done lots of travel all over Europe in order to get the photographs to use in my course. And I'd been doing that for about 15 years already. And it was the early 1990s when a new graduate student came into my office and he said, I want to do my thesis on the ancient earthworks of Ohio. And I said, the what? That's me. The what? Because this is my world, right? And yeah, I was even the ancient architecture guy, right? I was all over the Greeks. I thought Greek architecture was the most beautiful stuff. I've been to Greece, you know, too many times to count. And so I looked at him blankly and I said this. He came in the next day with Squire and Davis. How many of you know what Squire and Davis is? Okay, well, there's a good measure then of how many real earthwork fans we have in the room. So Squire and Davis were 2 gentlemen from Chillicothe, right that time, who wrote a book that was the very first book printed by the Smithsonian Institution when it was first founded. It came out in 1848, and it had these maps it was called Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, but like 80% of the things drawn in the book, and certainly all of them that looked anything like this, were in Ohio, southern Ohio. And you'll recognize that one, I'm sure. This is Chillicothe again, and up and down the Scioto River. This is the map that really astonished me, I think, the most on that fateful day when he brought that book to me. huge geometric earthworks lined up down the river. Each little geometric shape is bigger than a city block. And this just went on and on and on all over the Scioto Valley, the Great and Little Miami Valley, here in Marietta, and of course up in Newark, and then a few other places as well. So here's what I said. I had no idea. In other words, the ancient architecture teacher at the University of Cincinnati had no idea that right here in Ohio we had these amazing sites. So immediately, I get the kids in the car, get my wife in the car, get students in the car, and we are out there looking for them. You got to go find these things. I mean, it's incredible. Stuff's out there. You don't have to go to Greece anymore, right? You can just find cool stuff right here from amazing ancient culture. So, but here's what happened. Most of them were gone. Many of them were hard to see. That's Fort Ancient over there. It's kind of buried in the forest, right? How many have been to Fort Ancient? That's a long way from here, so you're really enthusiastic if you've been to Fort Ancient yet. And this is the Hopewell Mound Group, just outside of Chillicothe. And this was probably the #1 cultural and spiritual epicenter and pilgrimage site for 2/3 of North America. 2,000 years ago, people were coming here from Wyoming and the Great Lakes and Florida to participate in ceremonies and to bring treasured offerings. And so the first time I went there, it's like, what's there? I don't see anything. The Park Service hadn't put up any signs yet. So I'm an architectural photographer, so I have to put something in my foreground. So that's where that deer carcass comes from. You got to put something in the picture. The point is that these places, I found them to be very elusive. They can be hard to see. And even the ones that are right there in front of you that are well preserved are very hard to interpret. That's Fort Ancient again, a little more close-up view. And this is the Octagon Earthworks at Newark. How many have been there? Not quite as many. Well, you have a treat in store. So even the ones that are well preserved were a little strange. I mean, I'm an architect. I'm used to interpreting, buildings and even landscapes. But these things were strange. And I started to pose the question for myself, what kind of thing is an earthwork? What kind of place is this? It's hard for me to categorize it or to know how to begin to interpret what are these things. So next step, of course, was to go learn about them. And in those days, it was the early to mid 90s, when I was out searching these things. And the only place you could go to learn anything about earthworks was archaeology conferences. So I went to archaeology conferences and I started to listen. Okay, what are people saying about these things? What kind of thing is an earthwork? And of course, this was the answer. Earthworks are archaeological sites. Okay, and just about everybody, not only the archaeologists, which you'd expect, said these are I'm working on this archaeological site, and even tourism boosters who were sort of aware of that these might be important someday said, yeah, we got these great archaeological sites here in Ross County, okay, for example. But then I also met at some of these archaeology conferences, there were some native people there. And they sometimes they were asking, kind of tough questions because they seem to have a different orientation, a different, and I talked to them and I realized, well, no, they see these things as something different. I mean, they may see them as archaeological sites, but more important to them is they were sacred ancestral places. And I started to think, if you have a different point of view on them, you get different questions. You get different kinds of things that you might be interested in thinking about as you begin to interpret the earthworks. And I also noticed at these archaeology conferences that there were no good images. I mean, they were good for them. I mean, like trench plans and magnetometry maps and so forth. But there were no images that would make regular people want to go there or to help them understand what they're looking at. And there was no public knowledge. I would tell my friends, hey, I'm getting interested in the ancient earthworks of Ohio. And they would say, the what? Actually, no, they said, oh yeah, I've been to Serpent Mound, right? Which is the famous one. Everybody knows about Serpent Mound. But I was beginning to know something about the Hopewell earthworks. And so I said, you have no idea, right? What's sort of beyond Serpent Mound, like in every way. So that was kind of fun. So I'm getting very interested then in this kind of question. What do people think of earthworks as? So we got those two. And I also noticed that not only did the general public not know anything about them, talking mainly about the Hopewell earthworks now, but nobody in my field of architecture or architectural history knew anything about them. So in other words, nobody was seeing them yet as works of architecture. So I thought, well, that's a question. That might require some attention here, right? So for 20 years, I put together teams at the University of Cincinnati to create exhibits and a website and some CD-ROM publications with 4 goals in mind. First, could we make the grandeur of these places more visible, right? Because they're so elusive when you go there. So we did a lot of computer graphics work that looks like this. To bring out, the magnificence of the conception of these monuments. We created public traveling exhibits at the sites, and also one that traveled around, for which, of course, we had to translate the stories of these places, mostly from archaeology. Had to translate it into non-specialized language, so that regular folks could understand the importance of these places. And thirdly, we introduced more voices into the interpretation, especially including Native people that we video interviewed and so on, to help talk about what these places meant from the point of view of the descendants of the people who built them. Right? And that was not anywhere in the discourse about earthworks at that time yet. And the fourth thing we made a website out of all that called the Ancient Ohio Trail, where we mapped it all out across an interactive map to say this is a regional story, right? To try to help people in Marietta know that, the Great Miami Valley over there is also full of wonderful earthworks, and vice versa. Okay, so, and of course, in all that work, I was working to see them as works of architecture by taking all of those steps, working through all those goals, trying to turn them into place experiences loaded with cultural meaning. And of course, I was taking students around, and visiting scholars would come in from overseas, and I would take them to the earthworks, and then doing those little trips and talking about them with these people. I realized they were also beginning to turn into this cultural heritage destinations, and again, each one of these again brings up some new, shall we say, requirements about the kinds of things that have to be done in their interpretation. Okay, so 20 years doing all that kind of work, and right in the middle of that, I joined up with the committee that was beginning to prepare the World Heritage nomination for the Hopewell ceremonial earthworks. That's the 8 sites, Fort Ancient, 5 in Ross County, and the Newark earthworks up in Licking County. that had been designated as worthy of a World Heritage nomination. So we started working on that with, of course, the site owners, the History Connection, and the Park Service. And we invited a lot of international experts to come in and consult with us about that and tell us, well, what do you are these places worthy? Do you think we'll be successful with our nomination? And they said, we took them around to the sites and we showed them to them, and the experts talked about them and so forth. And some of them said, we had no idea. In other words, they were impressed and said, my gosh, yes, of course they're going to qualify for World Heritage. This is nothing like anything we've seen anywhere in the world, okay? But they said, you'll need to make it a home run, meaning the nomination had to be really perfect and really strong. And that was because the United States of America and UNESCO weren't on very good terms at that time. And of course, we know now they're not on very good terms again, or still. So it was good. It was like, don't give the World Heritage Committee any reason to say, oh, we don't want to do anything from the U.S. because we don't like the U.S. Don't give them any opening for that. Make it a home run. Okay, so that's a good story. And that home run advice became my mantra as I supervised the production of the World Heritage Dossier book. It did. It turned out very, very impressive. It was a big, impressive book. Everybody who saw it said, wow, how can I get a copy of this? You know how people get with big, beautiful, full-color, glossy books. So I did the job, and on September 13th, 2023, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, at about 10 o'clock in the morning, the gavel came down, and boom, the Hopewell Ceremonial Earthworks were then on the World Heritage List. And Chief Glenna Wallace of the Eastern Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma gave a stirring speech of thanks. At that very moment, they became one more kind of thing. Remember, I'm keeping track of these. How many kinds of things is an earthwork? Well, at least these 8 earthworks, including the Great Circle at Newark, Ohio, became the iconic architectural monuments of a brilliant civilization. Okay, wow. They did. That's what World Heritage sites are. Look at all these things. It's in great company now, right? Our earthworks in Ohio are the equivalent of those places that everybody knows. And those iconic monuments of great civilizations need a certain kind of book, right? And so here, this is our nomination book. See, it's a nomination to the World Heritage List. So there it is, and it fits right in with a selected grouping of my coffee table books, because that's what these are. It looked like one, and I realized immediately, well, that's why when we showed that big brown book to people, they said, ooh, how can I get a copy of this? It's because these kinds of books are very appealing. And they're very important. They serve a role. They're not just for sitting on your coffee table and making your friends think you're cultured. They're actually for opening up and at least reading the captions underneath all the beautiful photographs. But no, they tell the story of these important places in non-specialist language, with hopefully a certain elegance and a certain evocative mood that gives you a kind of a spiritual identification with the place, the places. So we went looking for a publisher, and 2 of us at that time, myself and Marty Chatsmith of the Newark Earthwork Center, a Comanche scholar who I'd collaborated with for a long time on the on those media projects, and then also helped us a lot with the World Heritage book. So we wound up with talking to Smithsonian as a potential publisher, and so they evaluated our initial proposal, and they said, well, maybe we'll have to think about it and so forth. And a couple months later, I mailed them a copy of that nomination book, which everyone had sort of oohed and ahed over. And 2 days later, I hear from the director of publications. She says, "We were blown away." So that's a nice quote to hear. I think they had no idea either about earthworks, so they were blown away by that. But they were also blown away by the look and feel of the book, and they were also very happy about the fact that the Smithsonian's first book ever was those two guys from Chillicothe who writing about the same topic. Say, whoa, hey, yeah, let's close the loop on this and do an updated thing. So that's my build up to this book, and that how can I get a copy of this? Is why I said at the beginning, well, if you have some Christmas list Christmas gift needs at the moment, this maybe would fill the bill, so that'll be available outside also at the signing table. So we had a publisher, and I should mention Marty Chatsmith is on there on the cover, along with Brad Lepper and Brett Ruby. You may know them or have seen their talks before. They are the two leading archaeologists from the Park Service and Ohio History, and expert on these sites, even though Brett is now retired and Brad is, I think, about to. So they have been key to putting this book together. So let me talk a little bit about this book, and then we'll move to the Traveler's Guide after that. This book needed to translate the nomination book into a clearer outline for the general public. There were things that were not needed that we had to tell UNESCO, and things that the general public needs that UNESCO didn't need, and so on. So we rebalanced all of that. But the theme of it still is to talk about these 8 earthworks and how they give testimony to the culture of their makers, and how they give testimony to the fact that those people were geniuses. Those are the 2 criteria that got them inscribed on the World Heritage. So there's specific criteria you have to meet in order to be inscribed, and they did it on that basis. So I will take a little time with each of those topics, culture and genius, and then this will be also good for those of you that maybe are less familiar with the story of the Hopewell culture. The story of the earthwork builders is that from AD 1 to 400, just a few generations, here in south central Ohio, there was a explosion of ceremonial and artistic elaboration that influenced much of North America. And we know that because they imported copper, large quantities of copper from Lake Superior. Obsidian came all the way from the Yellowstone Valley, that's Wyoming. And they had mica from North Carolina. They had seashells from the Gulf of Mexico, and so forth. They were all over the place, and their rituals and practices have left evidence all the way from Arkansas to Ontario and a lot of these other places as well. So that's how we know that Southern Ohio was the epicenter of cultural and religious thinking ideas 2,000 years ago. Now, to say more about the culture, in the Smithsonian book, we spent an entire year with additional consulting with a team of a group of Native American collaborators, and had, you know, many stimulating discussions through Zoom and over email, and we're able to put together quite a number of sort of new ideas about how Native American points of view help us to interpret these places more deeply, more richly. And one of the things they wanted to do is to show that the people were smart and cultured, and they lived rich and abundant lives in successful small communities. To show that the people were not, that they were real people. They were like us, you know, they did things, you know, they could see their breath when they were out hunting in the wintertime. And if you're wondering where these beautiful pictures are coming from, I'll tell you that in a minute. But they wanted their ancestors to be portrayed as real people, distinguished, smart, attractive people, and not merely as abstractions or as anthropological specimens, or, you know, the kind of thing that, again, you would normally read. And certainly not as savages, which is a word that has been used way too much, way too long. Portray the builders with elegance and respect, the people as well as the objects. So in order to do that, I commissioned an artist, a Shawnee artist named Talon Silverhorn, a very young man, so he's going to be on the scene for quite a while, doing brilliant things with the interpretation of his ancestors. Portray the objects. We had to portray these. These are all facsimiles, digital model facsimiles that Talon made, because the objects themselves can no longer be displayed. They've been taken off the shelves of museums almost everywhere now because of the beliefs of the tribes. Tribal consultation has said that that must be done. But it's okay to use facsimiles, and so Talon has these beautiful replicas. And the big bonus for Talon's work is he also makes these unbelievably beautiful digital portraits, so that the objects, which are usually just shown in you know, book plates, even in black and white, suddenly become real. They are the regalia of these distinguished and dignified leaders of the Hopewell movement. And so let's just go back again and look at some of these guys again. So a new way to portray the people and the beautiful imagery to go with it, appearing, I think, really for the first time in this much quantity and fully interpreted in this book. Another thing we could pull from that consultation was that many ideas that continue in Indigenous cosmology and belief seem to be presented in the earthworks. And so 2,000 years of continuity? Well, yes, probably, actually. So for example, the cosmology of much of Native America is that the universe is in 3 levels. There's the sky world, there's the earth world on which we live, and then there's a watery beneath world. Beneath world is a watery domain. And creation stories say that an animal brought up a little piece of mud from underneath the water, and they brought it up to the surface, and it grew to become the earth. Some tribes call it Turtle Island because the mud landed on the back of a turtle. So if you hear that expression, Turtle Island, that's the earth. That's the earth layer in this 3-level cosmology. Well, this is Fort Ancient. And this is one of the ponds that form in the wintertime, which were constructed as part of the design. And so here you see it. The whole universe right here. Sky, earth, water, reflections, The earth is rising out of the water. The earth is floating on the water. It's a beautiful, it's not just two piles of dirt on a soggy pit. In other words, it's a picture of the understanding of the universe. Okay, so that helps, right? That helps. And so the other thing we do in a little more depth in the big book is to talk about the genius of the earthwork, and that means to look at the earthworks themselves, which, you know, I can put my architect hat on now and say, how did they design these things with such huge sizes? Formation is 100 acres. The geometric figures at Newark are more than 1,000 feet across, and the geometry can be absolutely perfect. So there's a chapter, well, not a chapter, the big book, it has, between the chapters, it has green pages that explain some of these kind of thematic ideas in more detail. And one of them is about geometric construction. So it walks you through the process of how they could have, probably did, how they determined that they had a perfect square. It's done with simple geometry, could be done on the ground with sticks and strings. Actually, any carpenter knows that much. It shows how they could have matched the diagonals and of squares and the dimensions of squares and circles, which they did. It shows how they could have matched the area of a square with a circle, which they did. And it shows other kind of harmonies of how they different figures in a single complex, mainly Newark is what's been analyzed the most, was done, and how they could have made five earthworks all in Ross County that were made with the same figures and the same sizes, just put together a little bit differently. And there's another one of these green pages that talks about ancient astronomy, except I call it sky knowledge because it's not the same as astronomy. It's not anything like modern science. It's all based on observation. And the highest level of genius of these people is that sure, they figured out how the sun moves throughout the year. This is a person, this is the horizon, this is where the sun rises. Summer solstice, equinox, winter solstice, you know, it moves along the eastern horizon and back again every year. Most people know that, even though when sometimes I ask audiences, where does the sun rise? They say, huh? I don't know. And then I say, well, where does the moon rise? And everybody goes blank. And there's a good reason for that, because the moonrise position goes like this every month, back and forth, another month, back and forth, another month. And then that angle changes for 9 1/3 years. And then it expands again for another 9 1/3 years. So it only gets to here about every 19 years. But here's the Newark Octagon Earthworks. And there it is, every 19 years. That's it, right on line. And if you go here and you stand on this point right here and you look down this wall at the horizon, that's where it is 14 days later, every 19 years. And you see there's six more spots in the diagram, and they're all done with something here, corner to corner or down another wall. It's the most amazing piece of geometry. And sky knowledge, a monument to sky knowledge like no other on Earth. No other culture on Earth is known to have made a complete and perfect monument to the lunar movements. Now there's another circle in Octagon down near Chillicothe called High Bank Works, and it's got them all too. So they did all this in two places. Different latitudes, you know, the angles are different, slightly different. So these people were not primitive, they were not genius, they were not savages, they were brilliant geniuses. So that's the coffee table book. And Smithsonian did a great job of publication. Well, there's one more thing that iconic monuments of brilliant civilizations need, or when it happens when you join this company, is that people travel. They want to travel and go see them. There's the UNESCO effect. You know, people keep these lists. They watch the UNESCO list and then they see something new on it and say, "Oh, let's go there." And it's happening. Again, we were just in Chillicothe and our friends there are saying his visitation is way up. People are coming from overseas, way more now. Of course, they started the national park. That's logical. And so it's a good sized tourism market called cultural heritage travelers. So to plan trips, so back to my world, remember this. These are my well-worn tour guide books, and so all my travels around Europe, I was wearing out those books and becoming, I guess, kind of a connoisseur of what makes a good travel guide. As I was teaching about these places, not only the monuments but also the regions, like the Dordogne here in France, and that's my book about it. And I knew from my experience that when you go to a famous region, or a region with famous sites, like you go to the Dordogne to see the cave paintings, right? The 20,000-year-old bison on the wall of the caves, right? That's why you go there. But you don't just look at that. You look at the beautiful villages, you look at the castles, you look at, beautiful rivers and scenic drives, and you do it all. So that's why for a long time, it was a goal of mine. Even when we were doing a website, I said, I would hold this book up in meetings and I would say, we really need a book like this. We need something like this. So, but then I got busy with all those exhibits and then I got busy with the World Heritage, and so it all got put off. So that's the other book. Okay, that's this book now, is the result of that, bringing together my 30 years of traveling for the earthworks, and before that another 20 years of traveling in Europe and figuring out how they put together the sort of layers of interest within a beautiful historic region. All right, so what makes a good guidebook? It's small, it fits in your glove box, it's very compact, but it still has lots of pictures, at least one on each page. For the most part, as many as your publisher will let you have. It orients you to the whole region, geography, history, and all types of places. And it gives you ratings. This is what I liked best about the Michelin Green Guides, right? Michelin uses a rating system, 1, 2, and 3 stars. I kind of forget what 1 is, but 3 stars means it's worth the journey. Okay? Get in your car and go. Just go to that. You have to go to that. You cannot miss it. Right? So that's very helpful. People who are not really familiar with the region or the topic yet, you need to have the rating systems to know what your priorities are. Now, it's not just earthworks. I mean, this is my spread with Adina Mansion and Gardens. So Adina Mansion gets 3 stars. Worth the journey by itself, right? So the ratings are important. It covers the whole region. In this case, not only the Hopewell ceremonial earthworks of the UNESCO designation, but about 55 other mounds and earthworks. Also the geological history, historic towns and sites, scenic rivers, nature parks. And the stories of all those other topics actually connect in one way or another with the earthworks, right? The landscape was here before the sites, and they were built in certain places for a region. So and the historic towns are where the people lived who first sort of explored the sites, began to interpret them, make those early drawings, and so forth. So all these histories fit together. So the book is organized according to a map. This is the map from the book, and this is the map of the major Hopewell earthwork concentrations. 3 big concentrations, and then here's Marietta over here. Right? You guys are kind of an outlier in the Hopewell world, but we'll see. Very important. So the red line connects the World Heritage sites, and then the green lines are curated routes, mainly up and down the rivers. Your route here is the most obviously riverine-oriented line, and that takes you to everything else. All right, so the main earthwork sites, Fort Ancient, Mound City, and Newark. World Heritage Route anchored by 3 important historic cities. The branch routes look like this. This is the Brush Creek route, kind of on the, I'm assuming that anything on the other side of the Scioto River is like far away for you all. Works the other way, I'll tell you. So we're on the other side of the Scioto here, Brush Creek. There's Serpent Mound and Fort Hill, 2 3-star earthworks right together, worth the journey. And then we have a little bit of Zane's Trace here, so that's history of Ohio. And then we have 2 huge nature preserve complexes on that route too, the Edge of Appalachia and the Arc of Appalachia. So that's an example of how the branch routes are sort of customized maps to sort of curate the points of interest that are featured in the book. So Serpent Mound, of course, from the cover, Rocky Fort Gorge, Fort Hill, absolutely pristine hilltop enclosure, like Fort Ancient, only smaller and more remote, fascinating place. And then the other thing the book does is at the earthwork sites, it curates your experience in a particular way. It takes you around the trail, the loop trail. This is Hopewell Mound Group, just outside Chillicothe. And each number that I put in on the route corresponds to a paragraph, so that when you get to number 1, which, by the way, this is where that deer carcass was lying when I first went to the site, and I looked across the field and I said, what the heck am I looking at? Well, now the national park has a little sign there, so that helps. But I give you my version in paragraph 1 right there. So that goes with this location, that goes with this location, and so forth, in order to bring your attention to what you're looking at and tell you why it's significant. So there is something to appreciate when you're just looking across that open field, even though there's no earthwork in sight. There's a story that goes with that, and you need to know what it is. If you're there, you need to know why it's interesting. Well, there's other highlights. Certainly, I've talked already about the Octagon Earthworks in Newark. When people ask me if I have advice for them, let's say, what if I could only go to one earthwork, which one would it be? As much as I love Fort Ancient and as much as I love Marietta, my answer would be go to the Octagon Earthworks in Newark, Ohio. It is in perfect condition. You can see that here. It has that perfect geometry. This dimension is the same as this square that fits in here. Unbelievable precision. Perfect sky knowledge, even though you're not there for this event, you can still sort of stand next to those walls, and you can stand on this axis, and you can just think about it. It's good enough just to think about it. And the Ohio History Connection does put on events here. Just last year and the year before was when it was happening, every month. But now you're going to have to wait another 19 years. Sorry. So, anyway, it's just perfect. It's perfect in every way. And of course, it was just liberated from a private country club a couple of years ago, you probably saw that was big news. And so now it is open to the public at all times and very nicely interpreted by the local staff. And then Fort Ancient, also I think underappreciated sometimes, but it's another 3-star site. It's huge, it's in excellent condition, but I have to give you the insider tip, and it's in the book. Do not bother to go in the summertime to Fort Ancient. You will not see much at all because most of it's in the forest, and the undergrowth just erases it from your experience. When we were doing World Heritage, I realized that in order to put pictures in the book, I had to go out there and take all new photographs at Fort Ancient, and I had to go in February and March, which is when you get pictures like this. And you can see the walls really show up. Even the tree shadows are good in the winter because it shows you the contours so vividly. And that's when you can really appreciate the magnificence and the variety of the intricacy of Fort Ancient, with all of its walls and its ravines and the mounds and the ponds. There are those ponds again, and they only fill up with water in winter and spring. So, insider tip: go between October and April, but it's worth the journey, even though it's a long way across from the Scioto River. Sorry, but go in the winter. And sometimes there is an individual feature at a site, which also gets 3 stars. This is the Fort Ancient map. And way at the bottom of the site, here number 11, is the South Gate. And there it is on the legend. And there's the 3 stars. South Gate paragraph. 3 stars. Worth the journey. And so you get there and you think, well, it's just 2 big mounds of dirt. What's the big deal? Once again, appreciation requires that you're presented with a story that connects what's visible, the form in front of you, with a meaning. It would be the same thing if you went to the Acropolis in Athens and you're standing in front of the Parthenon. So, well, it's just a big, just a big bunch of columns. What's the big deal? You have to get the story in order to have it worth your plane fare to get there, right? You have to get the story. So that's what creates appreciation. So, for example, so 3 stars, worth the journey. But there's an insider tip there too. When you go to Fort Ancient, you have to follow my map because the site managers have erased Southgate from their guide map. Even though there's a trail there, there's no sign that says Southgate this way. So, but it's worth the journey because it's not just 2 piles of dirt. It's one of the 2 grandest ceremonial entrance gateways in the entire Hopewell world. The other is at the Great Circle in Newark. And that's because, we're up on a high plateau here, steep drop down to the Little Miami River, and there's a stone pathway, we're pretty sure came all the way up from the river to this point. This is the inside, so it's coming up the outside, over this threshold here, and down into the enclosure, the earthwork enclosure. So pilgrims were coming here, getting off their canoes in the river, climbing the stone ceremonial road up here, over and in. This was the dramatic portal into their high and holy precinct, right? So a culmination of a journey and those sorts of structures, dramatized entrance buildings, you might say, is a tradition in many types of architecture. The most famous one, again, is back to the Acropolis in Athens, where the gatehouse, the Propylaea it's called, is nothing but a celebration of elaboration through architecture of the act of rising to a sacred site and entering into an enclosed sacred place. So this is a different kind of architecture, but it's the same concept and beautifully done. And then, of course, I've already talked about this, so it's the ponds. Fort Ancient is really the only place where you can, and only in the winter, that you can see the Native American universe portrayed. But other sites, like, again, the Great Circle at Newark and also Mount City were also built with intentional water features that would combine the earthwork with a water reflecting pool. Okay, so the last thing about the book, almost here, is that the Traveler's Guide includes many quotations from the archives that we built up over that 20-year period of doing all those media projects. The quotes are on the page, and also some of the quotes are also available through a QR link in the back of the book. And there's a link, also videos available that show you the old computer graphics overviews that we made for our exhibits that help you to get a kind of mental picture of the whole, as Fort Ancient again, of the whole site, because sometimes when you're there, always actually when you're at an earthwork, you can only see a little fragment of it at a time. So you need to have the overview in your mind at the same time. Well, again, the book covers the whole region, and it covers all these different stories. So there are other highlights. The road from Chillicothe to Newark is a very rich experience through Tarleton with its little cross mound, completely unique. Lancaster, another beautiful town with spectacular house museums. And Granville, another beautiful town with its top of the hill, little alligator shaped, called the Alligator Mound. But it's, in terms of Indian lore, it's much more likely something called the underwater panther, which is a close relative of the serpent, the underwater serpent. And it was built about the same time as Serpent Mound, and they both have little cute curling tails, right? So there's a connection, and that's pretty interesting. And then way far away from here and along the Great Miami and Little Miami rivers, we have some more real highlights. The Great Council State Park tells us the history of the Shawnee tribe in Ohio. Sunwatch Village has a lot of these beautifully reconstructed houses, very similar to what the earthwork builders would have lived in, even though it was from about 1,000 years later. The largest mound in Ohio is at Miamisburg. And then, of course, you all over here are going to know about the Hocking Hills, but you may not know too much about Zaleski. A couple paragraphs in there about Zaleski and the state forest. And, of course, maybe you've heard of the infamous Moonville Tunnel, for example, just a few miles down the road from what could be the most beautiful mound in Ohio. And in the book, it'll have something to say about why that, from an architect's point of view, might be true. You think, well, that's a real subtlety, isn't it? But yeah, read about it. It's my favorite mound, with one possible exception. You all here have, well, first of all, check it out here. Yes, 3 stars. 3 stars. Marietta is worth a journey in its entirety, and then some of its individual features, I think, as well. Because you have several very impressive surviving earthworks, and you have the very best by far surviving mound, Adena Mound, with the ring around it still in place. That's what's unique here. And of course, if you go to Mount Cemetery, you're getting the overlay of early Ohio history with the veterans' graves and the earthworks. And you're also getting the wonderful story about what respect those guys had for the earthworks when they came here, which is a beautiful, beautiful story. If you know the story of Manasseh Cutler, He was a curious guy. He went to the top of the mound and said, okay, let's see what's in here. He went under a big stone and he found some human remains. And he said, enough. Put it back, closed it up. And no one ever violated the mound again, as far as I know. So that is, again, a beautiful story. So you have much to be proud of here. And here's, of course, the whole complex, one of our CG models. So 3 stars for Marietta. And then I love the Muskingum Valley too, all the way up. McConnellsville and Stockport are nice towns. I love that every little village has this little tiny riverfront park next to the lock. You know, it's really beautiful. So big write up on that. And then that route connects up through Somerset into. I had to choose between Somerset and Zanesville. I picked Somerset. I said, well, you can also go to Zanesville if you want. It has, half a paragraph along with Somerset. So, but Somerset is the best preserved of the early sort of Pennsylvania migration route agricultural towns. So it's worth talking about. Okay, so that's that one. I'm very proud of what Ohio University Press did in producing this. It feels it's just the right look and feel for a guidebook after, being sort of a connoisseur of guidebooks for 50 years. I think it turned out, I'm really pleased with what they did with it. So to completely wrap up here, what kind of things are the earthworks? The books I've created here are an attempt to probe deeply into these questions. The big book has to explain why these are the iconic monuments of a brilliant civilization. In other words, why they became World Heritage Sites, and then say more about those criteria. And the Traveler's Guide, of course, turns them into cultural heritage destinations, or tells what people who are looking for cultural destinations need to know. If people are coming to see the earthworks, they need help to see them, and then they need help to appreciate them, which just means you have to see it, and then you have to know the story that gives it meaning. That's appreciation. Okay, but those 2 categories, of course, add to the ones that were already there, which are both extremely important, obviously, central, in fact. But the correct answer is all of the above. And when all of those kinds of meanings are combined within vivid place experiences, it's the Newark Octagon again, one of my favorite photos, then they're working as works of architecture, which closes the loop on that question that my friend asked me once. What does an architect have to say about earthworks? Well, works of architecture are the things that do all of those 4 categories all at once and put it into your experience as a visitor. So they are very beautiful. They do offer vivid place experiences, many kinds of stories. And their builders were uncommon geniuses. And I guess this is also something that's been very important to me, is to be able to help readers and visitors appreciate and even to be amazed at our indigenous predecessors on this continent and to their modern descendants among today's tribal nations. So thank you. Thank you. So we can do some questions. Yes.
All those earthworks, are they just to put dirt and make a wall, or are they all burial?
That's a really good question. The mounds, if you see a freestanding mound somewhere, like Zaleski Mound, for example, is part of just a little cluster of mounds, it's almost certainly a burial mound. And it's almost certainly from the sort of pre-Hopewell centuries, that is 800 BC to about maybe 200 AD, something like that. That culture is called the Adena. So those are burial mounds. And when you get into the earthwork builders that are called Hopewell, many mounds that they built were not burial mounds. They were part of part of the design, the shape. They were used as spatial markers often. And the earthworks, I mean, I make a big distinction between mounds and earthworks. Okay, the earthworks, that is to say, the sort of linear things that enclose space, whether it's a square or a circle or an octagon, those don't ever contain burials. They were not about burial at all. They were about encircling a ceremonial space, right? And sometimes mounds were used to sort of articulate those spaces, to mark entrances and so forth, like the south gate. You know, it's two big mounds really on top of the walls, but they're spatial markers, not burial. Hopewell also built burial mounds like this one. This is the Sipe earthworks. That was a burial mound. And it's inside of one of those big geometric enclosures. So, long answer, but yes. Sorry?
How are you dating them? Different mounds?
There's been quite enough excavation to know there's a real consistency about what kinds of things were being built when. And not only humans, they can date the soil. They find remains of fires that were built in certain layers, and of course the carbon is directly datable. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that can contribute to the dating the dates.
How do we know that they weren't there? Like, my question is, like a lot of ancient things, like, how did the Egyptians forget how to build pyramids? You know, were they already there? How do we know that these things weren't already there? And like, hey, here's a great place to live. Other human beings have lived here before. If we're genetically dating organic material all the time, at least earthworks are organic material all the time when they get them.
Mm-hmm.
But stone is not datable that way.
Well, I think an archaeologist could give you a better answer, but I know one example, the Hopeton earthworks. They've done the most there with dating and with figuring out the chronology of how they put the walls up and so forth.
That's not record of the indigenous people building them, right?
They wouldn't have even if there were, it wouldn't have our concept of time in it. It wouldn't allow for any dating.
But there would be, they talk about themselves, they talk about the building of it at all, right? Or no?
No.
Okay. That's my question. Thank you.
At the bottom of the Hopewell earthwork, all the way at the bottom of the wall in the trench, that's where they found fires. So remains of a fire is easily datable. So that's how they know the wall was built after that date. Anyway.
They made a fire and then all of a sudden it got a little bit high and started making more.
Well, one interpretation of it is that building the wall there was a ceremony about building the wall, because the whole everything about life was sacred, right? So and that they made some kind of sacrifice, or anyway, yeah, that would be something like that. Yeah, something over here.
The student, how'd they do? How'd they do on their thesis?
Well, a certain modesty on my part is due at this point. Since I had no idea, I wasn't really able to evaluate his thesis on a basis of any facts. And besides that, it was more of a theoretical paper. He was talking about sort of landscape interpretation, sort of broadly speaking. But one thing that did come from that is that he introduced me to. He said, I met this guy up in Newark. His name's Brad Lepper. So soon I was on the road to Newark and meeting Brad Lepper, and so we've been collaborating for the 35 years ever since. So, yes.
I have a question about like on Mound Cemetery, what was inadequate to make the cut for that page?
Why didn't it make the cut? Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, that's. There are some technical things like it had to be on the site had to be on the, what is that called? National landmark status or something. I don't know if it is or not, but oh, well, I know another good reason. This would have been, again, from the archaeologist's point of view, and they were the ones that were planning the inscription early on, is that it's considered a Dina. Lots more people from the other side of the Scioto River ask, well, why wasn't Serpent Mound included? I mean, after all, it's by far the most famous. And the answer to that also comes from the archaeologists who say, well, it was almost certainly built by a later culture, 1,000 years later than the Hopewell sites, that is, to no end of confusion, called the Fort Ancient culture, but don't even pay any attention to that. It's explained in the book. So, in other words, they, for reasons of using the nomination to define the culture, I think that's why they bracketed off also the Miamisburg Mound, would have been a tremendous candidate. That and near Marietta Conus, for sure. Yes.
What is thought to have happened to the Hopewell civilization?
Yes, as I understand it, well, first there's no evidence that they were ever conquered. There was no warfare. They have not found graves indicating that kind of conflict. Probably not even too much migration, at least not right away. They just stopped building earthworks and slowly stopped using them. The forests began to grow back. They began to change the way they did their settlements, and there was a slow transition for a few centuries until corn agriculture came in, right? And that was coming in from the Mississippi Valley. If you've been to Cahokia down there in Illinois, you know about the Mississippian culture, and that changed everything because it changed the whole economy, changed the diet. People could live in larger towns, by that time the earthworks were already probably buried in the forest, and people's ceremonial practices had just evolved.
What were they supposed to evolve into? Was anyone know?
Well, it's a long and gradual process. I had a little trouble getting the story out of my archaeological collaborators. I mean, what can we say about those intervening centuries before about 900 or 1,000? That's when we have another, again, this so-called Fort Ancient culture has a pretty clear archaeological record. It's a little bit skimpy, sort of in between. Not enough for me to be able to explain it any more thoroughly than that. I don't think there's much evidence of disease in the at that time. Of course, the big disease story is after 1492. That's changes everything again. But our Shawnee and Miami friends are pretty convinced that based on their sense of their heritage, that they were the same people as at least the Fort Ancient culture at 1000 AD. And so very likely going back even further. And we do find these tantalizing connections, about other things in some of the artifacts and in the use of water, in the part of the designs and so forth that are still connected with cosmological ideas in Indian life today. So that's why it's very important. In all my list of ases here, see the earthworks as this and as that. Each one opens up new interpretive directions and what kind of things need to be said about them. And I've emphasized the tourism, what needs to be said to travelers. But again, our native friends are beginning to bring a lot of new and really intriguing insights to interpreting what these folks were about, and how they lived, and what would have been important to them. Things that you know, the archaeological community just hasn't thought of to ask before. So Talon Silverhorn is very important, I think, to that process. Another Miami scholar named Logan York. You're going to be hearing a lot from him. And they're just sort of beginning to come on the scene at the very tail end of my involvement here. So that'll be the next generation of opening up this interpretive range for the future. And that's very exciting. What else? Okay, well, thanks for coming. It's been a real pleasure to be here.